The moment Claire walked out the door, something about her story didn't sit right with me. "I'll probably be home late," she had said, her tone breezy. "Shopping with the girls. You know how we get when we're in the zone." I watched her drive away, the taillights of her car disappearing down our quiet suburban street, and that old familiar itch started creeping up my spine. Her excuse was plausible, mundane even, but Claire had been slipping lately. Not just slipping with her attention or time, but in the little ways. The way she avoided eye contact when I asked about her day. The way her phone had suddenly become an extension of her hand. Tonight, it wasn't going to sit. That itch was now a full-blown suspicion. I grabbed my phone, opening the tracker app we'd installed years ago. For emergencies, she'd said, though it had barely crossed my mind since. A few taps later, my stomach dropped. She wasn't at the mall. Instead, her little blue that hovered over a fancy steakhouse downtown, the kind of place that served $50 appetizers and required jackets for men. The type of restaurant that was only spontaneous if you had cash to burn or something to celebrate. Neither of those things fit our lives right now. I stared at the screen for a moment, willing it to change. Maybe her phone had glitched. Maybe she was lost and didn't realize it yet. But as I stood there, the seconds dragging into minutes, that blue that didn't move. It wasn't a glitch. I clicked the restaurant's name, then the number displayed beneath it. My heart raced as the phone rang, each second amplifying the tension in my chest. "Good evening, La Maison," a polished voice answered. "How may I assist you?" "Yes, I'm calling to confirm a reservation for Claire, last name," I said, forcing my voice into something calm and professional. "I'm her assistant, just double-checking the details." There was a slight pause as the hostess checked. "Ah, yes. A reservation for 2 at 8 o'clock. Everything is set." I almost dropped the phone. "For 2. I repeated, my throat tight. "That's correct." The confirmation hit me like a punch to the gut. Claire wasn't out shopping. She wasn't even with her friends. My mind raced, trying to rationalize it. Maybe a business dinner? Maybe someone canceled last minute? But no. Deep down, I knew. "Thank you," I managed, hanging up before my voice could betray me. I sat on the edge of the couch, my hand gripping the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. My brain buzzed with questions, excuses, and plans all at once, but none of them made sense. It wasn't enough to wait and ask her when she got home. It wasn't enough to stew in anger or let her walk through the door, offering whatever lie she'd rehearsed. I needed to know, and I needed to act. Without giving myself time to second-guess, I grabbed my jacket, pocketed my phone, and headed for the car. If she wanted to play games, I'd meet her where she least expected me. Tonight, I was going to find the truth. The drive to the restaurant was a blur of red taillights and angry thoughts. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly it hurt, my mind ricocheting between rage and denial. Temptation, betrayal, trust. These words swirled in my head like a toxic cocktail, each one leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. Temptation, the silent predator of relationships. You see it all the time in movies, read about it in books, but you never think it'll knock on your own front door. Claire and I had built something solid. Or at least, I thought we had. We shared laughs, arguments, lazy Sundays on the couch. So when did temptation sneak in? Was it some smooth-talking stranger? Or did it grow slowly in the quiet spaces between us, where we stopped paying attention? Betrayal. That's the word that cuts the deepest. Betrayal isn't just about the act. It's about the choices that lead up to it. Every lie she told, every late night or sudden burst of secrecy, had been a knife slipped between my ribs. Tonight, I felt them all twist at once. And trust. God, trust. The invisible glue of any relationship. The thing we build brick by brick, day by day, until it feels unshakable. I trusted Claire. I let my guard down in ways I hadn't with anyone else. And now that foundation was cracking beneath me, threatening to collapse entirely. The restaurant came into view, its warm glow spilling onto the darkened street. I parked a few spots away, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it might crack my ribs. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the sleek glass doors and the couples walking in, arm in arm. I thought about Claire sitting inside, laughing, drinking, playing a role I hadn't been cast in. A voice in my head whispered, "What if you're wrong? What if it's innocent? Some wild misunderstanding?" That voice was faint, drowned out by the roaring storm of doubt and anger. I stepped out of the car, the cold air biting at my skin, and walked toward the entrance. Each step felt heavy, like I was marching toward a battlefield. Inside, the restaurant was beautiful, soft lighting, the hum of quiet conversation, the clink of glasses. It was a place built for romance, for whispered promises and stolen glances. My stomach churned as I scanned the room, and then I saw her. She was seated in the corner, her back to me. Her hair was styled, her dress elegant, her laugh too familiar. Across from her was a man, leaning forward, clearly enraptured by whatever story she was spinning. He wasn't handsome in an obvious way, but there was something about him, polished, confident. His hand rested casually on the edge of the table, not quite touching hers. I froze, my feet rooted to the floor. My chest tightened, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. There it was, confirmation, not in her words, but in her body language. The way she leaned in, the way she smiled, the way she looked at him like he was the center of her universe. The rage that had been simmering boiled over, scalding hot. But beneath it was something colder, sharper, heartbreak. It wasn't just that she was sitting here with another man. It was that she had chosen to be here, chosen him over me, chosen to shatter everything we'd built. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to think. I could storm over, yell, demand answers. Or I could handle this with precision, with control. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Mark, my lawyer. I took a deep breath and pulled it out. "Are you ready for this?" he asked when I picked up. I stared at him again, Claire throwing her head back in laughter at something he'd said. "Oh, I'm ready," I said, my voice cold as steel. "Then let's go." I ended the call and started toward their table, each step steady and deliberate. Claire had made her choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. As I approached their table, time seemed to stretch and warp. The sounds of clinking glasses and hushed conversations around me faded into a dull hum. All I could focus on was Claire. The way she smiled, that slight tilt of her head as she listened to him talk. It was a look I'd once thought was mine alone. Every step toward her felt like carrying a heavier burden. With each one, I replayed moments from our life together. The first time we met, her tearful "I do" on our wedding day, the quiet mornings we spent sipping coffee in comfortable silence. The memories were now tainted, like someone had smeared grime over a painting I once treasured. Betrayal wasn't just the act. It was the loss of everything that came before it. She didn't see me at first, too engrossed in him, in whatever fantasy they constructed. I stood there for a moment, a few feet away, letting the weight of it all settle. I thought about turning back, walking out and confronting her later when I wasn't so raw. But no, she'd brought this here, to a public place, so I would meet her there. When I finally stepped closer, Claire noticed me. Her laughter froze mid-breath, her eyes locking onto mine like a deer caught in headlights. "Evening," I said, my voice sharp but calm. The man, her date, looked up confused. He didn't recognize me, of course. Why would he? I was just the guy his evening entertainment went home to every night. "Who?" he started, but I cut him off. "I'm her husband," I said, sliding into the empty chair at their table. My lawyer, Mark, stood just behind me, briefcase in hand. Claire's face turned ghostly pale. "What are you doing here?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I let out a dry laugh. "What am I doing here?" That's a funny question coming from someone who was supposed to be shopping with friends tonight. Care to explain why you're having dinner with him? I gestured toward her companion, whose face had gone red. "I think I'll go," the man said, starting to stand. "You'll sit," I snapped, my tone brooking no argument. The steel in my voice seemed to glue him to his chair. Claire opened her mouth, then closed it again. For a moment, I thought she might try to deny it, but what was the point? She was caught, and she knew it. "This isn't what it looks like," she said weakly, the oldest, most overused lie in the book. "Oh, it's not?" I said, leaning back in my chair, my anger barely contained. "So you weren't here lying to my face, sneaking around with him while I sat at home, trusting you?" Mark stepped forward, placing a manila envelope on the table. The slap of it hitting the polished wood made both of them jump. You don't need to answer that, Claire. Because whatever this is, it ends tonight. Her date fidgeted, looking around the restaurant, clearly hoping to disappear. The other diners had started to notice, their curious gazes flickering over to our table. Look, man, I didn't know she was married, he said, raising his hands as if that absolved him. I laughed bitterly. And I'm supposed to believe that? You think she didn't leave out that little detail to keep you on the hook? Stop it, Claire hissed, her voice low but sharp. We don't need to make a scene. I turned to her, my expression hard. Oh, we're past that. You made a scene the moment you stepped through those doors with him. The least you can do is own it. She looked down at her hands, twisting her napkin in her lap. She had no words. The silence between us was heavy, loaded with all the things we'd never said. The cracks in our marriage that had grown wider and wider until this moment. Finally, I stood, pushing my chair back with deliberate slowness. I didn't need her explanations or excuses. This is over, I said simply, my voice quiet but firm. I turned to Mark, nodding. You know what to do. And then, without waiting for a response, I walked out. Let her sit there in the ruins she'd created, the whispers of strangers following her like shadows. The drive home wasn't triumphant. It wasn't the fiery, vengeful satisfaction I'd imagined. Instead, it was hollow, a slow unraveling of everything I thought I knew. The car was silent, save for the hum of the engine. My lawyer, Mark, had offered to stay back and handle the fallout, giving me time to process. But how do you process something like this? Temptation, betrayal, trust, they weren't just abstract ideas now. They had faces, voices, moments attached to them. Claire's laughter at that table, her hand on that napkin like it was her lifeline, haunted me. And then there was the man, her man, fumbling excuses, sweating guilt. But the worst part? It was the memory of Claire's face when she first saw me. That instant flash of panic before she masked it with denial. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew the risk, the lies, the weight of her actions. And she chose it anyway. The betrayal wasn't an accident. It was a series of decisions, deliberate and cruel. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked different somehow. The warm yellow lights glowing in the windows had always been a comfort, a sign of home. Now, they felt like a mockery. This was a place where we built our life, where we made promises and shared secrets. It was supposed to be safe, but tonight it felt cold, unfamiliar. Inside, the living room was just as we'd left it. Her sweater draped over the back of the couch, a half-empty mug of tea on the coffee table. It felt like walking into a crime scene, except the victim was my trust, and the murderer was someone I loved. I dropped onto the couch, staring blankly at the wall. How had we gotten here? I replayed the last year, searching for clues I'd missed. The night she came home late, blaming work or traffic. The sudden interest in her appearance. New clothes, a different perfume. The time she'd pull her phone away when I walked into the room, laughing nervously. And me? I chalked it all up to stress, to life getting in the way. I didn't push her because I didn't want to be that husband, the insecure one, the jealous one. I gave her space, trusted her. What a fool I'd been. The deeper I spiraled, the angrier I became, not just at her, but at myself. I'd ignored the signs, turned a blind eye when things didn't add up. And why? Because I loved her. Because I believed in her. Because I wanted to believe we were stronger than whatever was trying to pull us apart. But love isn't enough when one person decides to burn it all down. The sound of tires on the driveway snapped me out of my thoughts. A few minutes later, the front door opened, and Claire stepped inside. She hesitated when she saw me on the couch, her face a mixture of guilt and defiance. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice quiet. "Talk," I said, my voice cracking on the word. Like we're two normal people who respect each other? Like this isn't the night you destroyed everything we built? Her shoulders sagged, and for a moment, I thought she might cry. But no tears came. Instead, she sat down across from me, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "I'm sorry," she said, barely above a whisper. I laughed bitterly, the sound raw and hollow. "You're sorry? For what? For lying? For sneaking around? For making me feel like an idiot while you played house with someone else?" "It wasn't like that," she said, her voice breaking. "Then tell me, Claire, I snapped, leaning forward. What was it like? Enlighten me. Make me understand how you could do this to me, to us. She opened her mouth, but said nothing. The silence between us was deafening. And in that silence, I realized something. I didn't want her explanation. Whatever reasons she had wouldn't change the outcome. It wouldn't undo the betrayal or rebuild the trust she'd shattered. I can't do this, I said, finally standing. Not tonight. I walked past her, heading upstairs. The weight of her gaze followed me, but I didn't look back. Let her sit there in the wreckage of her choices. For now, I needed space to figure out how to breathe in a world that no longer felt like mine. I didn't sleep that night. The bedroom felt suffocating, the bed a hollow shell of what it used to be. The faint smell of Claire's perfume lingered on the pillows, a cruel reminder of the person I thought I knew. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her at that table, laughing, leaning toward him, as if I didn't exist. At some point, I gave up trying and went downstairs. The house was eerily quiet, the kind of silence that makes you hear your own thoughts too loudly. Claire was asleep on the couch, or at least pretending to be. Her blanket rose and fell with her shallow breaths, but I didn't feel the usual tug of affection seeing her like that. She looked so small, so fragile. But that was the thing about betrayal. It made you realize how easily the people you love can break you, even without meaning to, or maybe because they meant to. I sat at the kitchen table, nursing a glass of whiskey I didn't want but desperately needed. The faint glow of my phone lit the room as I scrolled through old photos of us, each one a snapshot of a life I no longer recognized. Her smile in every picture felt like a lie now, a mask hiding something darker underneath. When did it start? Was it months ago? Years? Did she feel guilty every time she kissed me goodnight? Or did she compartmentalize it, separating me from him in neat little boxes? And then the darker questions came. Was it just him, or had there been others? How many nights had she come home to me, her lips still tasting of another man? The thought made me physically ill. I slammed the glass down harder than I intended, the sharp sound startling even me. Claire stirred on the couch, sitting up slightly, her silhouette barely visible in the dim light. "You're still up?" she asked softly. "Yeah," I said, my voice flat. She hesitated, pulling the blanket tighter around herself. I didn't mean for this to happen. The absurdity of her words hit me like a slap. I turned to her, anger boiling over. Didn't mean for what to happen, Claire? The lies? The sneaking around? The dinners? You don't accidentally end up in a high-end restaurant with another man. I know, she whispered, tears glistening in her eyes. I know I messed up. Stop. I cut her off, holding up a hand. Don't sit there and cry like you're the victim. Do you even understand what you've done? You didn't just hurt me. You burned everything we had. You torched the trust, the love, the future we were building. For what? A cheap thrill? Her tears flowed freely now, but they did nothing to soften me. I wanted to care. I wanted to feel something other than anger and despair, but I couldn't. It wasn't a thrill, she said, her voice breaking. It wasn't like that. I didn't plan it. I felt so lost, and don't you dare blame me for this, I said, my voice rising. Don't you dare try to turn this into some justification about how you weren't happy, or how I wasn't enough. I'm not blaming you, she cried. I'm just trying to explain. I don't want your explanations, I said, cutting her off again. I don't want excuses or apologies. I want the truth. Just once, I want you to be honest with me. Can you do that, Claire? Can you give me that much? Her silence spoke louder than any words could. She couldn't. I stood, running a hand through my hair, trying to keep myself together. You know what? It doesn't matter. Nothing you say will fix this. I need space. Don't follow me. I walked out the front door into the cold night air, the chill biting at my skin. The street was quiet, the kind of quiet that felt heavy, oppressive. I stood there for a long time, staring at nothing, my breath visible in the freezing air. For the first time in my life, I felt completely untethered, like I was standing on the edge of an abyss. And the only thing more terrifying than falling was the thought that I might already have. I walked for hours, aimlessly wandering the darkened streets of our neighborhood. The cold seeped into my bones, but I didn't care. Moving was better than sitting still, where the weight of it all threatened to crush me. The betrayal replayed in my mind like a cruel movie on loop. Her smile at that table, his smug, oblivious face, the reservation for two. Every detail felt like a fresh stab, and yet I kept turning it over, searching for some elusive answer that might make it make sense. Why? That was the question. Why did she do it? Was I not enough? Did I miss something along the way? A sign, a moment where she began to slip away? It wasn't like our marriage had been perfect. No marriage is. But I thought we were solid. I thought the vows we took meant something. When we said for better or worse, I never imagined the worst would come from her. My feet carried me to a park where Claire and I used to go when we first started dating. I hadn't even realized where I was until I saw the old wooden bench where we'd once sat for hours, talking about everything and nothing. Back then it was easy. Love was easy. I collapsed onto the bench, burying my face in my hands. What does it say about someone who throws away a life they've built for something fleeting? Was it worth it to her? Was he worth it? Did she even think about me when she met him, when she decided to text him back, when she dressed up for their first date? Or had she already let me go in her mind long before tonight? The thought hit me like a freight train. Maybe the woman I loved had been gone for a while, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. Maybe I was holding on to a memory, a ghost of who Claire used to be. And yet I couldn't stop loving that memory. I pulled out my phone and stared at it. Part of me wanted to call someone, anyone, to unload the storm swirling inside me. But who would I call? My parents? They'd try to comfort me, but the disappointment in their voices would cut deeper than anything they could say. A friend? Most of them were our friends, people who wouldn't know how to navigate this mess without picking sides. It struck me how isolating betrayal was. It wasn't just about what she did. It was about how it left me stranded in a sea of doubt and anger, cut off from everyone I thought I could lean on. I thought about calling Claire, demanding more answers, but what was the point? Her explanations would be hollow, her excuses meaningless. And yet, I wanted to hear them. I wanted her to try. I wanted her to fight for this, for us, the way I had fought to build the life we shared. But did I want that because I still loved her, or because I couldn't accept what she'd done? The truth hit me like a blow to the chest. I didn't know. I didn't know if I loved the real Claire or the version of her I'd created in my mind. I didn't know if I could forgive her, if I even wanted to. All I knew was that something inside me had broken, and I wasn't sure it could ever be fixed. As the sky began to lighten with the first hints of dawn, I made my way back home, my body heavy with exhaustion. Claire was still on the couch when I walked in, her face streaked with dried tears. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of guilt seeing her like that, but it was quickly swallowed by the ache in my chest. I didn't speak as I passed her, heading upstairs. Maybe I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew one thing. Things couldn't stay the same. Trust had been shattered, and without trust, what did we have left? I closed the bedroom door behind me and leaned against it, the weight of the night pressing down like an avalanche. Whatever came next, it wouldn't be easy. But one thing was certain, we couldn't go back. The morning brought no clarity. If anything, the daylight only sharpened the jagged edges of the night before. The house was eerily quiet, too quiet, like the calm before a storm. Claire was still downstairs. I could hear her movements, muted and cautious, as if she was afraid to disturb the fragile silence hanging between us. I stared at the ceiling, a knot tightening in my chest. Was this what our life had been reduced to? Tension, avoidance, the unspoken truth suffocating us both? It felt like we were teetering on the edge of something irreversible, and I didn't know if I had the strength to pull us back. Dragging myself out of bed, I showered and dressed slowly, delaying the inevitable confrontation. But I couldn't hide forever. When I finally came downstairs, Claire was sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of coffee. She looked up as I entered, her eyes red and swollen. "Morning," she said quietly, her voice tentative. I ignored her and poured myself a cup of coffee. The silence between us was deafening. Finally, she spoke again, her voice trembling. "We can't keep doing this. We have to talk." I turned to face her, leaning against the counter. "Talk about what, Claire?" "About how you lied to me. About how you betrayed everything we built together. Or, do you want to talk about him? She flinched at the venom in my tone, but didn't look away. I know I hurt you. I know I've destroyed your trust. But I need you to know that it wasn't about you. It was about me. I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. Oh, of course. It's not about me. It's never about the person who gets lied to, humiliated, blindsided. It's always about the cheater and their needs. So go on, Claire. Tell me, what did you need so badly that it was worth throwing everything away? She looked down at her mug, her hands trembling. I don't have a good answer, she admitted. I felt lost, unseen, like I was just going through the motions of our life, and I didn't know how to fix it. And what? He made you feel seen? I shot back, my anger rising. Did he tell you how special you are? How misunderstood? Was that all it took? Her voice broke as she replied. I'm not trying to excuse what I did. I just want you to understand. Understand? I repeated, my voice sharp. You want me to understand how you let some guy step into our life? How you decided he deserved your time, your attention, your affection, things that were supposed to be ours. Tears welled in her eyes, but I couldn't stop. Do you have any idea what this feels like, Claire? To look at you and not know who you are anymore? To wonder if anything we had was even real? Her voice cracked as she whispered, I never stopped loving you. Then why? I demanded, slamming my coffee cup onto the counter. Why wasn't I enough? Why didn't you come to me instead of running to him? She broke down, her sobs filling the room. But instead of feeling satisfaction, I felt empty. Her tears didn't fix anything. They didn't erase the damage or undo the choices she'd made. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said, my voice quieter now, but no less raw. And even if I could, I don't know if I want to. She looked up at me, desperation in her eyes. Please don't say that. We can fix this. We can try. I shook my head, a bitter smile tugging at my lips. You don't get it, do you? Trust isn't something you can patch up with apologies and promises. Once it's gone, it's gone. And without trust, what are we? Her silence was answer enough. I walked out of the kitchen, leaving her there with her guilt and her tears. I didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, I knew I couldn't stay in the ruins of what we once were. Some things can't be rebuilt, and some betrayals can't be undone. The rest of the day passed in a haze. Claire stayed downstairs, keeping her distance, while I barricaded myself in the bedroom, trying to sort through the wreckage of my thoughts. But the answers didn't come. Instead, the questions grew louder, drowning out everything else. What does forgiveness even look like in a situation like this? Could I look at her without seeing him? Could I sleep beside her without replaying every lie, every stolen moment? I wanted to believe it was possible, but my heart felt like a shattered mirror. No matter how carefully you piece it back together, the cracks never disappear. As the sun set, a part of me thought about leaving, just walking out the door, getting in the car, and driving until the road ran out. But I couldn't. Not yet. There was something unfinished here, something I needed to say. When I finally came downstairs, Claire was sitting on the couch, staring at the darkened TV. She didn't look up as I entered, but I saw her shoulders tense. I sat in the armchair across from her, leaning forward, elbows resting on my knees. We need to talk, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She nodded, her eyes fixed on the floor. I know. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us was a living thing, heavy and suffocating. I've been trying to understand. I began, my voice low, trying to figure out how we got here. What went wrong? If it was something I did or didn't do. Claire's head snapped up, her eyes wide. No, she said quickly. This wasn't your fault. It was me. I made the mistake. I broke us. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. As much as I wanted to believe that, a part of me couldn't shake the feeling that I'd failed too. That I hadn't seen her slipping away, hadn't fought hard enough to keep her close. I loved you, I said, my voice cracking. I trusted you. I thought we were building something real, something lasting. And you took that, and you threw it away. Tears welled in her eyes again, but I kept going. Do you even understand what you've done? You didn't just cheat. You destroyed the foundation of our marriage. You made me question everything I thought I knew about you, about us. I'm so sorry, she whispered, her voice trembling. I know I can't take it back. I know I can't fix what I broke. But I want to try. I want to earn back your trust if you'll let me. Her words hung in the air, fragile and desperate. But they didn't move me. Not the way they might have once. I don't know if I can, I admitted. I don't know if I can look at you the same way, or if I can believe you when you say it won't happen again. Because you didn't just betray me, you betrayed us. And I don't know if there's a way back from that. Her tears spilled over, and she covered her face with her hands. I'll do anything, she said between sobs. Anything to fix this. Please just don't give up on me. On us. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to reach across the space between us and pull her into my arms, to tell her we could make it through this. But that felt like lying to myself, pretending this wound wasn't as deep as it was. I need time, I said finally. I need space to figure out what I want, what I can handle. She nodded, wiping her tears. I'll give you whatever you need. Just don't leave. Her words were a plea, raw and vulnerable. And for the first time, I saw the depth of her regret, the weight of what she'd done. But regret doesn't erase betrayal. And love isn't always enough to heal the wounds we inflict on each other. As I stood to leave, I looked at her one last time. This isn't about what you want anymore, Claire. It's about whether I can live with what's left of us. I walked out of the room, leaving her sitting there in silence. And for the first time, I wondered if letting go might be the only way to set myself free. In the days that followed, the house became a battlefield of silence. We moved through the same spaces, but it felt like we were living in separate worlds. Every glance, every accidental brush of proximity was a reminder of how far apart we'd drifted. I buried myself in work, anything to avoid the quiet or the hollow ache that followed me everywhere. But even in the busyness, she was there. Her laughter echoed in the back of my mind, not the strained laughter from recent months, but the real, unguarded kind from years ago. I hated that part of me still clung to those memories, desperate to rewrite the present. Claire tried, in her way, to bridge the chasm. She cooked dinner one night, a dish she knew I loved. I ate in silence. She left notes on the counter, apologies, reminders of better times, promises to rebuild. I threw them away unread. It wasn't spite, it was survival. I didn't have room for her words, her efforts, her guilt. The wound was still too raw, too fresh. And then there were the nights. Nights were the worst. Lying in bed alone, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts spiraled into darker places. My mind was a theater, playing reels of what might have happened between her and him. The way he might have touched her. The things she might have said to him that she hadn't said to me in years. I wanted to stop caring. I wanted to hate her. But what no one tells you about betrayal is how deeply it twists love into something you don't recognize. On the third night of this unbearable routine, I found myself sitting in the living room, nursing another drink. It was late, too late for me to be awake, but I couldn't bring myself to face the bed upstairs. The sound of footsteps startled me. Claire stood in the doorway, her face drawn and pale. She looked as exhausted as I felt, her eyes heavy with sleepless nights. "You're still up," she said softly, echoing the words from that first night. I didn't answer. She hesitated before stepping into the room, sitting across from me like she was afraid to come closer. "I can't keep doing this," she said finally, her voice trembling. I raised an eyebrow. "Doing what, Claire?" "This." The silence. The distance. "I know I deserve it, but it's killing me. I can't fix what I've done if you won't let me try." I swirled the drink in my glass, staring into the amber liquid. "Do you really think this can be fixed?" I asked, my voice low. She didn't answer immediately. "I don't know," she admitted, her words barely audible. "But I want to try. I need to try." I set the glass down, leaning forward. "And what if I can't? What if I can't forgive you? What if I can't look at you without seeing him?" Her breath caught, and for a moment I thought she might break down again. But instead, she straightened, a flicker of determination in her eyes. "Then I'll have to live with that. But I won't stop trying until you tell me to." Her words hit me harder than I expected. They were raw, unpolished, not the carefully crafted apologies she'd been offering before. For the first time, I saw the weight she was carrying, the guilt, the shame, the fear that she'd lost me forever. But seeing her pain didn't ease mine. If anything, it deepened the chasm between us. I stood, the heaviness in my chest almost unbearable. I don't have an answer for you, Claire. Not tonight. Maybe not ever. But right now, I need space. I can't think clearly with you here. Her face crumpled, but she nodded. I'll go to my sister's, she said quietly. If that's what you need. I nodded, unable to meet her eyes. It is. She packed a bag that night, moving quietly through the house like a ghost. When the door finally closed behind her, the silence she left behind was deafening. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt hollow, as if her absence was just another reminder of what I'd lost. As I stood in the empty living room, I realized the hardest part wasn't deciding if I could forgive her. It was deciding if I could forgive myself for still loving her despite everything she'd done. The first morning without Claire in the house felt surreal. The quiet I thought I wanted now loomed heavy, oppressive. Her absence was a weight I hadn't anticipated, like a missing piece in a puzzle that could never be whole again. I tried to distract myself, cleaning, organizing, even going for a run. But no matter what I did, my thoughts circled back to her. Everywhere I looked, there were echoes of the life we'd shared. The framed photo on the mantel of us smiling on a hike, her favorite mug still sitting on the drying rack, the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the hallway. It was as if the house itself refused to let me forget her. But forgetting wasn't what I wanted. Not really. What I wanted was clarity. In the days since Claire had left, I'd replayed every moment of our relationship, searching for the point where things went wrong. Was it the long hours I worked? The arguments we brushed under the rug instead of resolving? Or was it something deeper, something neither of us could control? The answers were elusive, always slipping through my fingers like sand. By the third day, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I picked up my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I landed on her name. My thumb hovered over the call button. I wanted to hear her voice, to ask her how we'd ended up here, but fear held me back. What if she said something I couldn't handle? What if she told me that, despite her promises, she still didn't know why she did it? Or worse, what if I realized I still loved her and couldn't walk away? Instead of calling, I threw on a jacket and left the house. I didn't have a destination in mind, just an overwhelming need to escape the walls that felt like they were closing in. I ended up at a park, the same one where I'd sat on the bench days earlier. This time, I walked along the trail, the crisp air biting at my skin. The trees were bare, their skeletal branches reaching toward a gray sky. As I walked, my mind wandered to the idea of forgiveness. What did forgiveness even mean in a situation like this? Did it mean forgetting what she'd done, pretending it never happened? Did it mean letting her back into my life, hoping against hope that she wouldn't break me again? Or did it mean accepting that we were both flawed, that we'd both made mistakes and trying to rebuild from the ashes? A part of me wanted to believe in that possibility, but another part, the part still raw and aching, wasn't sure it could ever trust her again. Trust wasn't just something you gave, it was something you felt, and I didn't know if I'd ever feel it with her again. I sat down on a bench, staring at the frozen pond in the distance. My breath fogged in the air, each exhale carrying a piece of my turmoil. For so long, I'd thought of love as something unbreakable, a bond that could weather any storm. But now I realized that love wasn't enough. It had to be built on a foundation of trust, respect, and honesty. And when that foundation cracked, love alone couldn't hold it together. As the afternoon faded into evening, I made my way back home. The house was just as I'd left it, quiet, empty. But this time, the silence didn't feel as suffocating. It felt like a space where I could finally breathe, even if only for a moment. I sat at the kitchen table, pulling out a notebook and pen. For the first time in days, I let the thoughts pour out of me, unfiltered. I wrote about the pain, the anger, the betrayal. But I also wrote about the love, the memories, the parts of her I still cherish despite everything. When I finished, I stared at the pages, unsure of what they meant. Maybe forgiveness wasn't about forgetting or rebuilding. Maybe it was about letting go, not just of her mistakes, but of my own expectations. Letting go of the version of us I'd held on to so tightly, and making room for whatever came next. Whatever choice I made, I knew it wouldn't be easy. But for the first time, I felt like I was standing at the crossroads, ready to take a step forward.